Good morning. Today's scheduled reading on the BibleGateway.com program is just the first half of Psalm 119. But since tomorrow Sunday, we'll look at the whole Psalm today. And tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we'll be live from Mabel Lutheran in Sutton as normal. And then at 10:30 in person at Our Savior's in McHenry as well. Welcome to join us live at Mabel or in person at either place for sure. Psalm 119 is 176 verses, I think is what it is. Yeah, 176 verses. There are 8 stanzas of 8 verses, and each verse basically is a sentence. And in the first 8 verses, each sentence has something about law or ways, or, happy are those who are blameless, who walk in the way, in the law of the Lord. Happy are those who keep his decrees. Happy are they who do no wrong, but walk in his ways. You have commanded your precepts so that my ways would be steadfast in keeping your statutes. So it's acknowledging that God has put laws in front of us. He has given us guidelines. And I don't know if I should just say guidelines, but, a law is the way we are to live, the way we are to treat others. And in verse 7 is, I will praise you with an upright heart when I lead on your righteous ordinances. So it talks about God's laws. The second group asks, verse 9, how can young people keep their way pure? By guarding it according to your word. And in verse 11 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. I will treasure your word in my heart so that I may not sin against you. And this isn't just good advice for young, as how can young ones, but verse 10 says, with my whole heart I seek you. And then it's, I treasure your word in my heart so that I may not sin against you. And it's knowing God's law, knowing God's word, knowing what God would have for us. And basically, the 2 great commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if we treasure those words, they're going to do us a whole lot of good in life. And this stanza, verse 16, ends with, I will not forget your word. And, when we are taught God's word, when we're young, the things you learn when you are young, stick with you when you learn them properly. And so when we learn the words, and when we teach our youth, our grandchildren, our children, the youth of our church and community, about God's love and God's grace, teaching them the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, and what those things really mean, so that they have an understanding of who we are as God's people and who God is as our God. The next verses, do bountifully to your servant, asking God's blessing in an awful lot of ways, and protection, because like verse 23, even though princes sit plotting against me, your servant will meditate on your statutes, on your laws. So, it's, even in tough times, that God is there. And I'm going to go now, verse 41 is, let your steadfast love come to me and give me your salvation according to your promise. Then I will have an answer for those who taunt me. Well, who is your God? Where is your God? What can your God do for you? Especially in today's world, there are so many people and so many things that would take us away from God and say there is no God. And, and this is one of the things, I've said those things many times before, I know. But it's the truth. And it's a part of, as we read in, I don't remember where, but Satan is always around like a ravaging, roaring lion, eager to seek and devour his prey. There are many things in the world that would take us away from God, and so let your steadfast love come to me, that I have an answer for those who taunt me. for I trust in your word. And again, it's knowing God, knowing what God would have for us, and then living on that belief and on that trust into what we know. Now, starting in verse 65, it's, you have dealt well with your servant, O Lord, according to your word. Teach me good judgment, and I believe your commandments. And in verse 68, I like, you are good, and you do good. I mean, this is God. He is a good and gracious God, full of mercy and all that stuff. But you are good, and you do good. And this is the psalmist writing about God. But think about how you would feel if that was what people said about you. You are good and you do good. Some days maybe we are, and other days maybe not quite so much. The arrogant smear me with their lies, and at home hard I keep your precepts. Their hearts are fat and gross, but I delight in your law. It's good for me that I might be humbled, so that I may learn what your statutes are. And again, talking about God's law, keeping God's law, living according to what God would have us live. Jump now to verse 89. The Lord exists forever. He is, he was, and he will be. He is to come. He is forever. Your word is firmly fixed in heaven, and your faithfulness endures to all generations. It wasn't just the Israelites that God led out of captivity in Egypt, even though they turned against him so many times. I mean, God has always been there. He's always faithful, and to all generations. And, God continues to bless us as human beings yet today so very much. In verse 93 again, talking about God's law, I will never forget your precepts, for by them you have given me life. It's just, there's so much beauty in so many of these words. And then verse 101, I will hold back my feet from every evil way in order to do your word. I do not turn away from your ordinances, for you have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. And just, when we, the will of God for us is good. And, it's sweeter than words to the honey. And then verse 105 is another one I have underlined in my Bibles, and it's a wonderful verse to know. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. It's God's word illumines the way that we should live. It shows us the right way. And when we look at who God is and how God treats humanity and everything, it's, we want to be like God, and we want to live according to his promises. So your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And if you're like me, you know the words to that song, or you know the melody, and you probably sing that verse when you come to it, or you read it first and then you sing it, Verse 116, uphold me according to your promise that I may live and not be put to shame in my hope in you. And so again, it's having that trust and faith in God. In verse 116, we weep at evil and injustice. He writes, my eyes shed streams of tears because your law is not kept. And I think about, the murders. There's so much that in robberies and so many things that are so wrong in life. And, we weep for others because of that. Verse 146, day or night and all day long, God is there. I will cry to you, save me, that I may observe your decrees. I rise before dawn and cry for help. I put my hope in your words. My eyes are awake before each watch of the night. And it's just, God is always there. And verse 153, look on my misery and rescue me. Here again, a plea for grace and mercy. And then verse 164, it talks about the person's prayer life. 7 times a day I praise you for your righteous ordinances. Grant peace and have those who love your law. And verse 1069, let my cry come before you. Give me an understanding according to your word. And my lips will pour forth your praise. My tongue will sing songs of your promise. And so it's, we could look at each section, each 8 verses, and really, we could do a lot of in-depth, and we could spend a lot of time on this psalm. But it's a summary of all that is. And it ends with, I have gone astray like a lost sheep. Seek out your servant, for I do not forget your commandments. So again, it's an admission that we sin, we go astray. And then we ask God to, seek us out, bring us back to the right path. Set us on the straight and the narrow, basically, maybe that way we should say it. So enjoy your Saturday, and tomorrow on a Sunday, remember that, that God says, to take a day of rest on the Sabbath and to remember who God is. And that's such an important thing. And that's another one of the things that's pointed out so much in so many different Psalms and many different